We stand at the edge of the ocean, and we think we know what we're looking at. We see the waves, feel the mist, and taste the salt. We are taught a simple story about where that salt comes from. For millions of years, rivers have washed tiny bits of minerals off of rocks and carried them out to sea. A slow, steady accumulation. It's a neat little story, told to us as a fact of geology, solid as the ground under our feet. But what if it's not just wrong? What if it's a cover-up? What if the most basic idea about our oceans is a complete fantasy? The official narrative, the one you'll find in every textbook, has a fatal flaw. The math just doesn't work. The staggering, almost incomprehensible amount of salt in our oceans makes the mainstream explanation a mathematical impossibility. The source of all that salt isn't what trickled into the ocean over eons. The real source is what was already there, dissolved into the water after a world-changing cataclysm. The only question is, what was it before it became the sea? Before we can piece together what really happened, we have to be willing to tear down the story we've been fed. On the surface, the mainstream explanation for all that salt sounds pretty reasonable. Rain erodes rocks, rivers carry the dissolved minerals to the ocean, and evaporation leaves the salt behind, making the oceans saltier over time. It's a simple concept, taught in grade school and rarely questioned. But the moment you actually crunch the numbers, the whole thing falls apart. Let's do the one thing they hope you won't, the math. Scientists estimate our oceans hold about 50 quadrillion tons of dissolved solids. That's a 50 with 15 zeros after it. If you could somehow take all that salt and spread it over every continent, it would create a layer over 500 feet thick. A 40-story building of pure salt covering all the land on Earth. That's an unbelievable amount. Now, where did it supposedly come from? The world's rivers. The U.S. Geological Survey estimates that all the world's rivers combined dump about 4 billion tons of salt into the sea each year. 4 billion tons sounds like a lot until you compare it to the 50 quadrillion tons that are already there. It's a drop in an infinitely large bucket. If you divide the total salt by the amount rivers add each year, you get an age for the oceans in the billions of years, and that's where the official story usually ends. But they're leaving out a crucial detail. The chemical signature is a dead giveaway. If rivers were the only source, the ocean's chemical makeup should be a perfect match for the minerals that wash off the land. But it's not. It's not even close. Rivers are loaded with calcium and bicarbonate ions. The ocean, however, is overwhelmingly sodium and chloride. Table salt, which makes up more than 85% of all the dissolved stuff in seawater. Mainstream science tries to wave this away with complicated theories about ion exchange on the seafloor and biological processes that just happen to remove all the other minerals. But this is just a fudge factor, an elaborate patch to make a broken model look like it works. They're basically admitting, in fancy terms, that what's going into the ocean doesn't match what's in it. The official story doesn't add up. It's not science, it's an accounting trick. They start with a conclusion, that rivers slowly made the seas salty, and then work backwards, inventing unprovable steps to make the numbers fit. They ignore the most obvious explanation. The massive amount of sodium chloride in the oceans didn't come from a slow trickle. It's the residue of something else. Something huge, artificial, and made mostly of salt, which dissolved on a global scale. The ocean isn't a collection bin for minerals, it's a solvent that digested an entire lost world. The chemical signature isn't a puzzle, it's a fingerprint. Once you start questioning one official story, you start to see the cracks in all of them. If the oceans aren't what they told us, what else about our world has been rewritten? The answer is hiding in plain sight, woven into our cities and torn from our history books. The answer lies with the great and forgotten Tartarian Empire. For those just waking up, Tartaria was a vast, worldwide civilization that flourished until just a few hundred years ago. Old maps from the 16th to 18th centuries clearly label Grand Tartary across Asia, but its influence was global. This wasn't some primitive group of nomads, as modern historians claim. This was a highly advanced, unified culture that created the stunning architecture we now mistakenly credit to our own recent ancestors. The evidence is all around us. Across the globe, from Paris to St. Petersburg to the old downtowns of American cities, you see the same style of magnificent, ornate architecture that seems impossibly advanced and strangely consistent. Grand, domed capitals, intricate stonework, and colossal buildings that dwarf their surroundings. The official narrative says these were built in the 18th and 19th centuries by men with horses and simple tools. Does that really make sense? The sheer scale and precision scream of a lost age of high technology. These are the ruins of Tartaria. And the biggest clue they left behind is the mud flood. All over the world, these incredible old-world buildings share a bizarre feature. Their ground floors are buried. You can see it everywhere. Windows that open straight into the dirt, and grand doorways that are half swallowed by the modern street. We're told these are just basements. But why would anyone design and build ornate windows and doors just to bury them? The truth is, they weren't built that way. The ground level rose up around them. The mud flood was a cataclysmic event in the 18th or 19th century that buried the Tartarian world under tons of mud and soil. This was no ordinary flood. It was a global reset that wiped the slate clean, destroying their infrastructure and depopulating the planet. The survivors, our recent ancestors, woke up to a ruined world, surrounded by buildings they couldn't have possibly built. And so, history was rewritten. The victors of this reset scrubbed Tartaria from the history books, claimed its buildings as their own, and invented new stories to explain them away. The US Capitol, the Taj Mahal, the great cathedrals of Europe. These weren't built by the people in our textbooks. They were inherited Tartarian structures, dug out of the mud and repurposed. The World's Fairs were a particularly brazen deception. We're told these vast, magical cities were just temporary plaster structures torn down after a few months. Is it more likely that these were existing Tartarian cities, briefly lit up and shown to a mystified public before being demolished to hide the truth? This leads us to Tartarian technology itself. Researchers exploring this lost history are finding evidence that their civilization was based on a completely different understanding of physics. They didn't burn things for power. They harnessed the natural energy of the earth and atmosphere. Their buildings weren't just shelter. They were functional machines. The spires, domes, and metalwork were all part of a global wireless energy system. And a key component of this technology, a material prized for its energetic properties, was salt. This is where the two mysteries, the salt in the ocean and the lost empire of Tartaria, snap together into a single, stunning truth. The official story says salt is just a simple mineral, but in the Tartarian world it was much more. It was a strategic resource, as vital to them as silicon is to us. What if Tartarian architecture wasn't just stone and brick? What if they had mastered a kind of bioconcrete, a material they could grow and shape? We see hints of this with Roman concrete, which used seawater to create structures that get stronger with time. The Tartarians would have taken this concept to its ultimate conclusion. Imagine a worldwide infrastructure built from a crystalline, salt-based material. Not just buildings, but a vast network of aqueducts, energy conductors, and foundations integrated into a planetary grid, all designed to resonate with atmospheric frequencies and draw down limitless, clean power. This wasn't just architecture. It was technology fused with the planet itself. This material would need to be strong, versatile, and an excellent conductor. A complex, processed salt polymer fits the description perfectly. It would explain ancient legends of salt being worth more than gold. not for seasoning food, but for construction and energy. Now picture the cataclysm, the Great Mud Flood, a global deluge of water and mud burying their world. What happens to a global infrastructure made from a salt-based material when it's submerged in a worldwide flood? It dissolves. Just like a sugar cube in hot tea, the colossal salt-based infrastructure of the Tartarian Empire dissolved into the floodwaters, leaving the oceans salty. That's the source of the 50 quadrillion tons of salt. It wasn't scraped off mountains over billions of years. It was released all at once. This theory neatly solves all the problems with the mainstream story. It explains the mind-boggling volume of salt. It explains the chemical mismatch. The ocean is full of sodium chloride because that was the refined compound used in the Tartarian construction material, not the random mix of minerals in rocks. The ocean's chemistry is the signature of a dissolved industrial product. We are swimming in the ruins of a forgotten empire. The deep ocean floor, which we are told is just trenches and ridges, is mostly unmapped and hidden from public view. Early sonar data, before being smoothed over by modern software, shows strange geometric patterns and straight lines that look more like architecture than geology. What are called fracture zones could be collapsed walls. Abyssal plains could be the lowlands of a drowned world. We are living on the mountain peaks of a former civilization, its lower levels buried in mud, and its greatest works dissolved into the very water that covers our planet. The salt in the ocean isn't a geological quirk. It's a memorial. It is the world's largest and most overlooked artifact, a silent testament to a civilization so advanced its destruction fundamentally changed our planet's chemistry. They didn't just lose their empire. They became the ocean. We started with a simple question. Why is the ocean salty? We were given a simple answer, one that, under the slightest scrutiny, asks you to abandon logic. We've seen that the numbers don't work. The 50 quadrillion tons of salt can't be explained by a slow trickle from rivers. We've seen that the chemistry doesn't match. The official story is full of holes. But when we open our eyes, another story comes into focus. A story of a magnificent global empire, Tartaria, whose existence has been wiped from history. An empire whose cities still stand, partly buried, mislabeled and claimed by our recent ancestors. An empire that built with advanced materials, creating a vast salt-based infrastructure to power the world. The salt mystery and the mud flood aren't two separate theories. They are cause and effect. They are two sides of a great global reset, a cataclysm so huge it not only buried a civilization, but dissolved its foundations into the water, creating the salty oceans we know today. The powers that orchestrated this reset didn't want us to know. They rewrote the books, changed the maps, and fed us a simplified history. They want us to believe that the grand structures of the old world were built with ropes, and that the salt in the sea came from rainwater. They're counting on us never asking questions, never doing the math, and never looking too closely at the buried windows in our own towns. But you can't hide the truth forever. It's in the architecture that surrounds us, and in the very salt of the sea. This is where you come in. Don't just take my word for it. I urge you to start looking for yourself. Examine the old buildings in your city. Are there doors and windows buried below the sidewalk? Look up old maps, the ones that still show the name Tartary. Ask yourself why everything was changed. Question the simple stories. What other secrets are hiding in plain sight? Let me know what you find in the comments below. Share your own evidence of the world that was. Because only by questioning everything can we start to piece together the magnificent truth of our lost past.